my senior year, when I turned 18, decided to get my real estate license and pursue business. And one of my older friends, who was a mentor of mine, hired me to work for his company. And so I started learning the ins and outs of real estate and was closing deals left and right and was really loving this whole business. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had made a little over $100,000 in real estate. And living at home, I had no expenses, so that wasn't bad at all. And so I really, at this time, though, started to develop this arrogance inside me. And I just thought, man, I'm untouchable. I can do anything. I don't even need school. I'm just going to keep doing business. I'm going to keep pursuing this. And my definition of success really was driven and determined by how much money I could make. And so meanwhile, my dad, who's a pastor of a church in Hollywood, he's one of the most compassionate people that I've ever met. And he inspires me all the time. And so at this time, they were starting to be more involved with global issues in Africa, the AIDS epidemic and the water crisis. And he found out the statistic that you heard earlier, that 1.1 billion people around the world don't have access to clean drinking water. And so when he told me this, it was so shocking, but it was just a number. I was like, man, I can't believe that, but 1.1 billion people don't have water. So he decided he wanted to do something about it. So he created this bottled water. We called it Generosity Water, and we were selling it at the church and to different stores in Los Angeles and gyms, and we got different celebrities started to endorse it and get behind it and promote it. And the idea was, hey, we're going to give 100% of the profits towards building wells around the world and giving people clean water. So the idea was, while we're drinking clean water, we're also giving clean water to people in need. So it was a very simple idea. And so after the first year, we raised enough money to fund our first few water projects in East Africa. And he asked me, he said, hey, Jordan, why don't you go and check out these projects in Africa? Why don't you go and visit them and see what the need is out there? And I'm so glad that he asked me to do that, because it was this trip that forever changed the course of my life. And I remember all I knew of Africa at this time was what I had seen in magazines, newspapers, and on TV in these charity ads. And so I saw that, you know, these people in Africa, it must be just this war-torn country. Everybody has a machine gun, or it's, you know, kids with distended bellies and flies in the eyes, and everybody's hopeless and depressed and sad, and that was my picture of Africa. But when I got there, it was actually quite the opposite. I remember seeing some of the most happy, positive kids I've ever seen. They would run up to us laughing and smiling and dancing for us. And I just couldn't help but think to myself, how is it that people who literally own nothing can possess so much happiness, so much joy, so much hope? And it was really starting to be contagious. This little girl, man, she knew she was cute. Every time I had my camera, she just jumped in front of the camera and would do different poses and start smiling. And so this girl, she became a good friend of mine. And these little boys, and so I just would see this left and right, and it really started to change my perspective on what Africa really was and what poverty looked like. And so the first country we went to after this was Kenya. And at this particular time in Kenya, they were experiencing an 18-month drought. We went to the southern part of Kenya in the Maasai region, where the longest standing tribe in Africa is, the Maasai warriors. And it was the driest time of the year. It was a really desperate area. We walked into this village and we literally saw dead cows and dead goats on the ground because they didn't have any water. And some of the leaders in the village were telling us that even they lost some of their kids because they didn't have any water to give them. And so I asked them, I said, well, where do you get your water? How do you guys survive? And they told me that they walk 10 miles each way to find water. 10 miles there and 10 miles back, and they do that every single day. And I couldn't even believe what that would be like, because, I mean, in the U.S. here, we train for weeks to even run a half marathon, let alone every day walking 10 miles each way. And so I asked them, being the naive kid that I was at 21, I said, could we go and can I walk with you on this journey? Can I see what it's like to go and get water? And they kind of laughed at me, but they agreed. They're like, all right, you can come with us. And so it was one of the hottest days I'd experienced. It was desert heat in Africa, 110 degrees. And I'm sweating like crazy, and we're going on this walk. And about halfway through, I'm like, man, I should have never asked them. I should have just taken their word for it. They walked 10 miles. I get it. But I'm sweating, and it's just one of these really hot days. And then the women start telling me, they said, Well, sometimes, every once in a while, we actually find water at this source that's about 5 miles away instead of 10. So we're going to go and check that source first, and if there's water there, we won't have to go all the way up into the mountains. So I'm like, oh, please, God, let there be water at this 5-mile source. I'm done with this walk. It's done. And so as we start to get up to this water source, they notice that there's a little bit of water there. And so the women, they start jumping up and down. They start chanting. They start cheering. They start talking to each other. And they're speaking in their local language, so I didn't even know what they were saying. And our translator, he said to me, they're saying, it's our lucky day. It's our lucky day because there's clean water here, or there's water here. And so we walk up into this trough, and I look, it's a cement trough with about 1.5 inches thick of green and brown algae water. And I'm thinking, it's our lucky day? This is my worst day ever. And we just walked 5 miles to get water that I wouldn't even let my dogs drink, let alone a human being, but yet it's their lucky day? This started to really change my perspective. Take a look at this video.
Now about 15 months, 1.5 years, no water, no anything. Cattle have already died. This is our river. About 3,000 people are coming from 7 kilometers to fetch water here. If we can get water, people will survive because water is life.
And so as I began to see these people, drinking water that the cows were drinking, that the cows were urinating in, it really started to break my heart, and it started to change my perspective on life. And I thought, maybe the skills that I've been given, maybe the talents that I have could be used to actually help people. Maybe we could create some kind of an organization where we could help solve this problem. Maybe we couldn't solve the whole problem overnight, but we could help these villages that we're seeing, and we could figure out a way to get people access to clean water. And as we learn, now the United Nations posted an updated statistic that says there are nearly 884 million people in the world that still lack access to clean drinking water, which causes 3.6 million people each year to die. That's 10,000 people per day. And more than half of the world's hospital beds are filled with patients affected by the water crisis, with water-related diseases. And as we would walk through these countries and as we drive through, we would see countless young boys and girls and women carrying these 45-pound jerry cans full of water. And they're walking for miles in order to do this. So it puts these young kids at risk to rape and attack on these long journeys alone. And it also prevents them from going to school because they're walking for hours. And so we really started to learn here that clean water is actually the first step to breaking the cycle of extreme poverty. Because we couldn't go and build more hospitals in a place where we weren't stopping the reason why they were going to the hospital in the first place. They needed a water well. We didn't want to build another school in a village unless they had access to clean water, because the kids wouldn't even be able to go to school because they were walking for hours. And then we what inspired me here was that although this is such a massive, massive crisis that affects so many people around the world, there's actually a real and tangible solution. We can actually drill down several hundred feet under the ground. Africa is not lacking the resources underground, they're lacking the financial resources to access it. And so this was a problem that we could actually solve. And so we started establishing partnerships around the world with nonprofits that were in these countries that have been doing the work for over 10 years, that know water and sanitation, know the cultures very well. And so we've been able to get our average price point now to about $3,000 per well. And this will help about 300 people in the community get access to water for life. And so that, if you break that down, that's only $10 per person. So right now we're seeing 10,000 people die per day because they don't have $10. And I couldn't believe that. So as soon as I got home from this trip, I was like, all right, I got to do something about it. So we literally, I quit my job doing what I was doing, and I decided to dedicate the rest of the next season of my life here towards helping people get access to clean water. And so the first thing I decided to do is I was like, well, man, I got to get some other young people fired up about this. We got to do something about it. Now that I learned about this crisis, I mean, I think the only thing worse than not knowing about the issue is knowing about it and then not doing anything to help. And so it was around Christmas time, and I asked my friends and my family and anybody I could talk to, I shared these photos and stories, and I said, hey, instead of giving me a Christmas gift, would you consider donating something to Generosity Water so we can go back to these villages and build some water wells? And so I remember this particular community called Peche Village, and it meant overcrowded. And this was the water they were drinking there. They had too many people in this village. And so there needed to be 2 wells in this particular village. But they were telling us that over half of the population of this community had died about a month before we got there due to a cholera outbreak in the water. Half of the population. So when we got there, people were still grieving the loss of their mothers and brothers and daughters. And I guess what was so impactful to me is that these statistics became people. They became stories. They became people I could relate to. And so I kind of shared these stories like I'm doing with you now, and I asked people to give and to get involved, and we had an incredible implementing partner here in this country. And by Christmas time, people who definitely wouldn't have given me a Christmas gift still gave something, and they contributed and were a part of it. And together we raised a little over $6,000, and we were able to go back and build a clean water well in this village, 2 of them actually, and give the entire population clean water. And so this idea kind of stuck with me. I was like, my dad had an idea to sell bottled water at the church and raise money, and I gave up my Christmas gifts, and at the time I was only 21 or 22, and so I'm thinking, man, there's something that each of us could do. We all have a gift, we all have a talent, and I was, being young, I thought my voice and my influence is going to be with young people. And so I thought, what can I do to inspire other people to get involved? And so after just sharing these stories consistently with people, we've seen a 9-year-old girl did a readathon, and she raised over $1,000 and got people to sponsor her. We've had people climb Mount Kilimanjaro and get sponsors. We've had people swim long distances, run marathons, give up Christmas gifts and birthday gifts. And it's really been a combined effort of so many people contributing to this. And so every single year, we put on an event. We're based in Los Angeles, and so over the years, we've built some great relationships with entertainers and media, and we throw this event called the Night of Generosity. And so we bring people together, and we charge a ticket price, and we share videos that night, and we have a great display from Africa. And this last year in March, we raised $107,000, and we actually had, they said, over 100 million media impressions from this one event that we had last year. So more people were learning about the issue, and more people were giving, and it started to continue to build momentum. And then just recently, Katy Perry met with us, and she decided that she was going to nominate Generosity Water as one of her official charities that she goes on tour and she raises money for. And so within the first 3 months of her campaign, they raised over $40,000 and funded some more water projects in India and Ethiopia. And so, excuse me. And so I guess I want to close with this final story. I was in Ethiopia about a year and a half ago. And this was by far my favorite country that I'd ever visited. And this particular region that we went to was called Tigray. It was in the northern part of Ethiopia, and it was extremely dry. The terrain reminded me and looked a lot like the Grand Canyon. They had these huge views and these tall mountains, and everything was rocky and dry. And so as we pulled into this village where we had funded a well, there was nobody around. We drove in, and we looked around, and nobody was there. All we could see was this beautiful view and dry, rocky mountains. And so we kind of waited for a few minutes. And then all of a sudden, we started to hear this trembling noise behind us, and these like rocks started to fall down from the mountain. And so I looked back, and we see about 1,000 people chasing after our van. And we're in the middle of Ethiopia here, and this is my first time there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in the wrong place. What are we doing here? Hit the gas, go, 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 go. Like, we got to get out of here. And then our driver's like, no, Jordan, calm down, calm down. These are actually just the school kids from a nearby village that are coming to celebrate with you because now they have clean water for the first time. And as they got closer, we could see they were all wearing school uniforms, and they were holding up signs in the air, and it's as if they were at a sporting event. These signs said, "Water is life," or "The water load of our mother is now reduced." And one kid simply just held up a sign that said, "Water." He spelled it wrong, but we knew his heart. We knew what he meant. And as they got closer, then I want to show you this little video from this village. Just built the well for, and we're here celebrating together. I've never seen something like this in my life. It's amazing. So as you could see there, they brought together thousands of people to celebrate the fact that they had clean water. And it was part of their tradition for some of the elders in their village to give a speech and to thank us for the water, and they asked us to give a speech as well. And I'll never forget what this one 72-year-old woman, she said to us. She said, and she had this wrinkled face and hunched back, and she looked up and she started talking to us. She said, "For all my life, I've had to walk miles every day to find water for my family. And all of the time, this water was so bad that I've even seen my children and my grandchildren get sick and die from the water I had to give them." And she said, "This whole time I've been walking uphill for carrying a 45-pound clay jar on my back, which is why my back is now hunched over." And she started to get emotional, and she looked at us and she said, "You've literally taken the weight off of my shoulders, and you've given my kids a new chance at life. See, I was never educated, but now our kids, they have that chance." And every time I look at the massive numbers that are still people that still need water, and I get discouraged and I get distracted and think, are we even making a difference? Are we even helping people? Are we even making a dent in this crisis? I'm reminded of stories like these. And over the last 3 years, we've been able to raise a little over $2 million and fund 350 wells now in 18 countries around the world, which is serving about 200,000 people with access to clean water. And I'm reminded that each one of these 200,000 people have a story just like this woman does. And so we cannot get distracted by how big these problems seem and not do anything at all. But rather, if we can break those numbers down to represent one person, one family, one community at a time, I believe together we can change the world. And as Deepak says, that together we can create a peaceful, just, and sustainable world. A world that I believe where everybody has access to clean water. I believe that if we all do our part, that we can see this crisis end in our generation. Thank you very much.
Wow.